Edward Kingston had always been a man of precision. Numbers were his playground, deals his art, and influence his currency. Owning Kingston Elite Cars, a chain of premium car dealerships sprawled across San Francisco, he had spent decades cultivating a world where every detail bowed to his control. The glint of chrome on a luxury vehicle, the polished floors of his showrooms, the cadence of his employees' greetings, all had once been perfect reflections of his meticulous vision. Yet recently, a ripple had disturbed that controlled surface. Whispers, casual murmurs about staff treating ordinary customers with impatience, disdain, and sometimes outright rudeness. Edward could not abide it. Not because it threatened profits remained healthy, but because it touched a deeper chord within him, the chord that reminded him why he had started in this business. He had not begun in a marble-floored office, but in a dusty garage. A young man with grease-stained hands, armed with little more than curiosity and stubbornness. The thought that the human element, once sacred, had eroded under the weight of his company's success made him restless. That morning, Edward decided to confront the problem himself. He did not announce it, did not summon his managers, did not plan a covert investigation through cameras or disguised emails. He chose a method far simpler, yet more revealing. In the back of his closet, beneath suits that cost more than the average person earned in a year, lay an old canvas bag. It smelled faintly of motor oil and forgotten afternoons. Inside was the uniform he had worn decades ago as a young auto mechanic. With a sigh of quiet nostalgia, he pulled it on. A faded blue jacket, sturdy jeans, worn boots. No driver would ferry him across the city. No luxury car would announce his arrival. Today, he would disappear into the throng of San Francisco commuters, a ghost in his own empire. The streets were alive with the rhythm of morning. Trams clanged as they trundled along their tracks. People jostled and hurried, each lost in their private world. Some read newspapers, others checked their phones, and some simply stared out the window, perhaps daydreaming or perhaps escaping. Edward watched it all, noting the minutiae of city life. The way a man held his coffee cup as if it were a fragile artifact, the careful adjustment of a child's backpack, the faint smile exchanged between strangers over nothing at all. Life thrived outside his office, outside the neat columns of spreadsheets and profit charts, and it was good to remember that. By mid-morning, he arrived at his south-of-the-market dealership. The sun glinted off the massive glass facade, bouncing off the golden logo that had become synonymous with success. It was a symbol, but Edward now saw it differently, not as triumph, but as a monument hiding a growing fault line. He stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of polish and tires. The employees glanced at him with cursory acknowledgement, their faces schooled into polite detachment. Some tried to ignore him entirely. The manager's gaze, a sharp and cold measurement, cut across him with thinly veiled disdain. In the corner, a clerk stifled a chuckle. Edward said nothing. He did not need to. The silence of observation spoke louder than any reprimand could.
He wandered the showroom, noting each interaction with almost clinical attention. The way one salesperson interrupted a client's question with impatience, the subtle sighs of those who felt underappreciated, the perfunctory gestures offered instead of genuine guidance. As Edward moved from car to car, he noticed small details that spoke volumes. A brochure was bent carelessly on the counter, an empty coffee cup abandoned on a chair, a stack of files shoved into a corner, as if someone could not be bothered to maintain order. It was not chaos in the traditional sense. It was something subtler, more corrosive, a lack of care, a lack of attention to the people who walked through these doors. He recalled his own beginnings, when he had spent hours polishing used engines until they gleamed, when he had patiently explained to nervous first-time buyers how their cars worked, even under the worst pressure. Back then, respect for people had been inseparable from business. Somewhere along the way, that had been forgotten. Edward left without a word. Returning home that night, he did not feel anger, but a deep, simmering disappointment. It was not just about service, it was about humanity, the core of what business had always meant to him. If the human connection failed, what remained? That night, he barely slept. Images of careless employees, of customers treated like inconveniences, danced behind his eyelids. He thought of the young mechanic he had once been, the long nights under flickering fluorescent lights, the satisfaction of restoring a car and seeing a customer's face light up. That memory, vivid and unyielding, reminded him of the standards he had promised himself long ago. The next day, Edward arrived in a crisp suit. Confidence radiated from him not as a threat, but as a calm, undeniable authority. He summoned the staff to a conference room. The lights dimmed, and on the screen appeared footage from the previous day. Faces frozen in action revealed attitudes no performance review could adequately capture. Silence spread, heavy and uncomfortable. Edward's voice, calm yet unwavering, broke through it. He spoke not of punishment, but of truth. Some were shown the door immediately, their arrogance and disrespect leaving no room for discussion. But others, those who had retained a spark of humanity, were noted and remembered. Among them was Emma Lawson, young and unassuming, who had treated the disguised Edward with genuine attentiveness and warmth. In her, Edward saw the reflection of his own early ideals. In recognition, she would later rise to lead the customer service department, embodying the company's renewed commitment to sincerity. Months passed, and a transformation quietly took hold. The showrooms no longer radiated cold efficiency. Laughter, not forced smiles, filled spaces once stiff with pretense. Each client, regardless of their attire, wealth, or background, felt seen and valued. Edward wandered these spaces often, not to impose authority, but to witness the rebirth of a culture he had feared lost. He saw employees listening attentively, guiding with patience, and celebrating small victories with genuine joy. The realization dawned slowly. Luxury lay not in the shine of a car or the grandeur of a showroom, but in the intangible warmth felt by those who stepped inside. One rainy afternoon, Edward witnessed a scene that stayed with him. A young couple had entered the showroom hesitantly. They were nervous, uncertain whether they could afford a vehicle or even what suited them. The employee who greeted them crouched slightly to match their eye level, asking about their lifestyle, their needs, even their hesitations. He did not push. He listened. Slowly, the couple's shoulders relaxed. They laughed at small jokes, nodded at options, and in the end, they left not just with a car, but with a sense of accomplishment and dignity. Edward, observing from the sidelines, felt an unfamiliar swell of pride, one rooted not in profit but in human connection. The city itself became a character in Edward's reflections. San Francisco's hills, the smell of the bay, the distant hum of traffic, all reminded him of the delicate balance between ambition and humanity. The cafes along Market Street, the street performers on the corners, the early morning joggers weaving through the fog, all of it contributed to a rhythm he had once ignored. Now he saw it as a mirror to his own business, fast-moving, full of potential, but vulnerable to losing its soul if attention was not paid to the human heartbeat beneath the surface. Edward also began recalling his past in vivid detail. The garage where he had started had been a small, cramped space with peeling paint, a single flickering light bulb, and a stack of tires in the corner. He had been the youngest apprentice, the one who asked too many questions and made too many mistakes. Yet each error had been an opportunity. Every engine failure, a lesson. Customers had smiled at his fumbling attempts because he had smiled back with equal honesty. Those days had ingrained in him a principle he never forgot. The human connection, sincere and unpretentious, was the foundation of everything lasting. Over time, Kingston Elite Cars became more than a chain of dealerships. It became a place where people were nurtured, where employees could grow not just in skill but in empathy. Edward walked through the showrooms daily, noting small changes, a polite gesture remembered, a question answered patiently, a hesitant client encouraged. He realized that leadership was not about control or intimidation, it was about observation, intervention, and modeling the behavior he wished to see. Even competitors began to notice. While other dealerships boasted of glossy cars and top-tier sales, Kingston Elite cars became known for an almost intangible quality: respect. Clients spoke of the warmth, the sincerity, the attention given not just to their money but to them as people. Edward understood that, in the end, this was the real luxury, the one that could not be bought or faked, the one that left a lasting impression far beyond the initial sale. Late one evening, Edward walked the city streets alone, reflecting on the journey. Neon signs flickered, casting soft glows on rain-slicked pavements. Street performers filled corners with music. Vendors called out to passers-by, and somewhere, a child laughed. Edward felt a quiet connection to it all. The empire he had built was vast, but its true value was measured not in numbers, but in the lives touched, the smiles exchanged, the trust earned. And in that, he found the deepest satisfaction. The story of Edward Kingston is more than a tale of business acumen. It is a testament to the idea that success without humanity is hollow, that respect and kindness are currencies more enduring than gold, and that leadership is most profound when it nurtures rather than dominates. Every decision he made, every step he took toward restoring the human element, created ripples across his company and his city. Kingston Elite cars had transformed, but so had he. And in the heart of San Francisco, where ambition often eclipses empathy, Edward's quiet insistence on kindness shone like a beacon, reminding all who entered his world that luxury begins with the human spirit.